Whenever they'd say 30 years, I started feeling old. I don't know about the rest of you. I want to start with a story. The story is about a water bearer that's in India, and he has 2 pots. Each of these pots he ties a rope around, puts across a rod in the back, and carries them down. He carries them down every day to the stream to get water and brings them back to his master. Well, one of the pots had a slight crack in it. The other one was very beautiful and gorgeous. Well, for 2 years, every single time they went down to get water, they'd walk back up, and by the time they'd reached the master's house, one of the pots would only have half the water in it. So the pot decided that he wanted to share that with the water bearer. And he was feeling very bad and sad that by the time he got to the top, there was only a half a pot of water. And the water bearer looked at him and said, "As we walk up today, what I want you to do is notice the flowers alongside the road." And so the cracked pot did notice all the flowers as he walked along. And it cheered him, but when he got to the top, to the master's house, he was once again sad, because he once again only had a half a pot of water. And the water bearer looked at him and said, "But did you see those flowers? Your water every day has watered those flowers. It is your water that's allowed them to grow. And it is your water that has allowed them to grow so I can pick them and put them in the master's house." At that point in time, the crackpot realized that although he had some cracks, that he was very unique. So the moral to that story is we're all we're a little unique, and we're all a little bit of crackpots as well. And probably more than one of you can relate to that as well. But as we talk about a whole topic today, firing can be a good thing, and everybody goes, "Oh, I want to know about that because it's never felt good when I've had it." And I'm taking a little bit of a different approach to this than what you might really be expecting from there. We're going to be talking about firing, but it can be across the board in many different ways. And so we're going to have fun. I'm going to expect some participation. So I've already clued the people in the back row that if they think they're going to get away with not participating and being in the back row, that they got another thing coming. Before I go on, thank you very much, Crystal, for the introduction, but it's often good to get a chance to know a little bit about the person that's up here. And I ran businesses for about 30 years in Boston and moved out here about 7 years ago. And it is that passion for running business is the reason I do what I do. Now, the part of it as well is a little bit about me. My son is up in the center there, and he just graduated from high school, and he's heading to Tufts University in Boston, so he's heading back there. Anybody know that it is expensive to send kids to college? Especially Tufts. Actually, I think all of them are expensive. We go from there. But one of the things that I've had the opportunity to do is write a book called The Family Business: How to Be in Business with People You Love Without Hating Them. And I have some here in case any of you in family businesses? Any of you know families that are in family businesses? Are they always peaceful and everything's perfect? No, maybe not quite all the time. Well, one of my favorite chapters is how to fire your spouse. So if you, in fact, most of the time family businesses come to me, they say, "How do I fire my spouse?" And I say, "Go look at chapter 6 and you'll get some clues to that." So I love changing the way people think about business and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Whether you're an employee, a business owner, a family business owner, any aspect, this is going to be your chance to look at things in a little bit of a different way. But one other piece of who I am is I also have a radio show called Action in Business, and I talk about all things business, from what is business like in Niger, Africa, to what's business like in Colorado Springs, to the economic indicators. There's a wide range of things we talk about. And I also have a set of sponsors that I always love to appreciate, and that's CenturyLink, Adams Bank and Trust, and Pennica Financial Group, because they're the ones that allow me to do this show. And so there's just a lot of things that I love doing about business. But let's go start talking about our topic for the night. So the agenda is really, we're going to be talking about mindset. What is your mindset? You may want to fire somebody, but do you need to look at what your mindset is first? One of the things I think that is going to happen tonight is that you've got a mindset that you got here with as to what you're going to get out of it. And I might just twist that mindset just a little bit to look at things in a little bit of a different way. The other is mirror. So the next piece is, what does a mirror do? A mirror reflects back at you as to what you need to be doing. And that's often the hard part, is looking at the mirror, is to looking at the changes that maybe you need to be doing before you fire that employee or things along that line. From there, it's measuring. Okay, what's the effect of making this firing, making this changing? And then once you've done all that, it's movement. And I like to steal the Nike commercial of just do it. And that's sometimes what just needs to happen, is you just need to do it. So we're going to have some fun and get started from there. But that's sort of our agenda. And you have some sheets of paper on the place there that you can write some notes and things along that line as well. So let's get started in the whole aspect of mindset. One of the first aspects of mindset is you need to look at how do you look at things. So I look at this as you've got blame, excuses, and denial. Well, it's somebody else's fault, right? That's the reason you didn't get it done. Or I didn't get it done because. Or we were late getting here because we got pulled over by a cop and got a ticket. And it's the cop's fault, right? It's not yours. So as we look at blame, excuses, and denial, that's allowing you essentially to be a victim. Versus ownership and accountability and responsibility gives you control. So if you were late coming here, should you have maybe left maybe a tiny little bit earlier? And what is it that you have control over? So let me tell you a story. The story is about a guy by the name of Harvey and a cab driver by the name of Wally. Any of you ever traveled to a city and gotten a cab before? They're always the most pleasant people in the world, right? Well, Harvey gets out, and he's in a big city, and he goes down to get a cab, and a cab pulls up, and he notices the guy that gets out, nice black pants, white shirt, crisp, with a tie, and the whole bit. Harvey goes to give him his luggage, and Wally goes and gives him a card, and the card says, "My mission statement is to deliver you to your destination as quickly and safely as I can." Harvey goes, "Okay." They go and get in the car. And the cab driver, Wally, says, "I have coffee as well as decaf tea. Would you like either of those?" And Harvey goes, "No, but do you have any soda?" He says, "Absolutely, I have a cooler full. Would you like regular soda or diet?" And he said, "Well, I'd like a diet soda." Then Wally goes and says, "I also have the Wall Street Journal and a couple of other local papers, as well as I have a card here with all the radio stations. What would you like to listen to?" Harvey said, "Okay, wait a minute, guy. I've traveled the world and I've never had a cab driver ask me any of these things. Hey, do you do this all the time?" And he said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do now, but I didn't always. 2 years ago, I was like every other cab driver, but I chose to change my mindset as to how I looked at things. I chose to go look at things in a different way. I went to a personal growth seminar, and in that they talked about I can take ownership, accountability, and responsibility for how I look at my business. I happen to be in a very controlled industry. The city tells me how much I can charge, but they don't tell me how I can serve my customers. So what I've chosen to do is to change my mindset and look at everything I do." And he said, "The 2 years I've done this, my profit's gone up 100%. Who would like to increase their profit 100%? Okay? And I'm on target to do that again the second year. Now the difference is I serve my customers differently. I don't spend time waiting in the cab line with everybody else, because my customers call me when they're coming into town, and I come pick them up. When I have overflow, I have another cab that can take things, and so I don't have some of the challenges. And guess what? Because I could utilize it, I could choose which customers I want to work with. I.e., he can fire the ones he doesn't want to work with. Getting the concept? So part of it becomes that mindset that you look at. And it becomes your choice. Do you want to be above the line or below the line? And this becomes a choice you have and things that you want to put in your own business from there. Now what often stops people is this concept of fear. And fear can have many meanings. I picked two. One is forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. It's rumored that elephants are afraid of mice. Now that makes absolutely no sense. Does it? Why would a big elephant be afraid of mice? Well, we won't go into the story. It's been proven that elephants are afraid of mice. But are we afraid of facing the things in our business that means that we have to make tough decisions? That means we have to change our mindset. That means we have to look at things in very different ways. And is a firing of an employee, a vendor, a mouse become employee, a vendor, a customer become our mouse? And we're the elephant. So as we look at mindset is the thing that you really have control over, the things that you want to do. Any questions so far? All right. Now let's start looking at, as we also look at fear, you have to look at what do you fear most and go do it. Eleanor Roosevelt once made the comment, do one thing you fear every day, and will you no longer fear it? So take what your fear is. For some of us, it might be mice, it might be firing, it might be snakes. There's a lot of things that we have or fear, and those fears are the things that often hold us back to doing things. This is actually the hardest part, because what does the mirror do? It reflects back at yourself as to what you're doing and how you're doing things. So as we look at wanting to fire employees, wanting to fire vendors, wanting to fire your husband or your children or any aspect of that, you got to look at, okay, do I have any ownership in this? Going back to our mindset. Are there things that I need to do and I need to do differently? So we look at communication, we're going to look at rules of the game, we're going to look at boundaries and roles and responsibilities. And as we look at communication especially, I get reminded often of, I chose to move from Boston to Colorado Springs. I'm from California. Moved to Boston, said I'd never stay there any longer than I had to for school. Took me 30 years to leave. But when I did, actually, my husband and son flew to Colorado Springs. We had somebody we didn't know pick them up at the airport, take them to what I considered the middle of nowhere, up for a divide, the Boy Scout camp up there. No cell service. I had no idea whether they were alive or dead. Everything's packed up. I'm going to the airport with my other one of my other beloved possessions, and that was my rabbit. We have a pet rabbit that lives in the house with us. And then there was the dog, which friends were taking care of, but the rabbit was supposed to come on board with me. They didn't tell me they considered my pet a rodent, and they wouldn't let me have the rabbit on, so she was going to have to go below. So I got the stress of having gone. I've sent my family, you have those emotions of am I ever going to see them again, type of thing. All the emotions of having lived there, and I'm going through TSA. Now, TSA is normally a very pleasant experience, right? especially at Logan, yes. And for some reason, TSA said something to me. I, to this day, couldn't tell you what they said, but I snapped at them. And I didn't use any foul language, but I responded back in a pretty bad way, and she sort of snapped back at me. But the time that I snapped at her and basically told them they were useless, to the time I crossed through TSA, I realized that the reality is I was the one that was wrong, okay? I'd had a bad day. And so what I did when I got through through the other side of security is the woman was there, she had her back to me, and a couple of people had heard it, and I said, excuse me, and she wouldn't turn around. I said, excuse me, and she finally turned around figuring she was going to get yelled at. And I said, you know something? I need to apologize to you. You did not deserve what I just gave you and what I just did. I have never seen 4 mouths drop more than the 4 TSA agents looked at me and said, I don't think anybody's ever apologized to us. But as we look at the mirror and we look at people we want to fire, at customers we want to be ticked at, think of, you don't know where they're at. You don't know what position what they've gone through. So as you may want to get frustrated with your customers, your employees, your vendors, your subcontractors, understand that until you really understand where they're coming from and you change your communication, and in this case I was the customer, but I needed to change how I communicated with them, and very possibly made an impact in the rest of her day, of the next person that may have yelled at him. And I won't say I haven't groused at a TSA agent since then. But so as we look at communication, that's one piece of it, and we're going to be going into that a little bit more. We also have rules of the game. Rules of the game is how do you want people to operate? How do you want your employees to operate? I've got a client that wants everybody showing up. If work starts at 8 o'clock, they expect people to be there by 8 o'clock, not 8:05, not 8:10. But how are you communicating, and what are those rules of the game? If you've got subcontractors that work for you, any of you ever use subcontractors to deliver some of your services? Some of you do. Have you communicated with them how they should operate? You know, if it's a service, do they wear booties? Are they allowed to be late? What is the process? And do they know the rules of the game that they need to operate? Or are you assuming that you told them once 12 years ago, therefore they should still know that? Maybe. Then there's boundaries. One of the biggest issues in family businesses is boundaries. Is having the mix of everything going from home to business back to home again. So we're going to talk about boundaries a little bit more, and then roles and responsibilities. If people do not know what they're supposed to be doing, how are they going to know that they're supposed to do it before you get frustrated with them and say, "You're out of here"? And that's especially true in family businesses, because we say, well, we're just going to all do it together. How well does that work for you? I can tell the ones that are laughing are the ones that have been in that family business, and the fingers have pointed occasionally here and there. So let's talk about an event. We can even use the event of me being at the airport. My response affected the outcome. But let's just go with a little bit of a different story on this one. Husband, wife, breakfast. They've got a 7-year-old girl. Breakfast is down there. She comes downstairs ready to go to school. Orange juice is sitting on the table. She's excited. She knocks it off, all over her dress and all over Dad. So that's the event. Now, Dad goes, I'm not picking on dads because moms also yell, but we're going to use Dad in this scenario. Dad goes and yells at the little girl as well as his wife. "Why did you set that orange juice there? You're always clumsy." What do 7-year-old girls do when they've been yelled at first thing in the morning? Cry, okay? Is that helping get everything done? No! So Dad needs to go change his clothes. Little girl needs to go change her clothes. And how fast do you think she's going to do that? Not really fast. So by the time the clothes get changed, she walks downstairs very slowly, just to watch the bus go down. Now Dad gets to go take her to school. And little girls, when they've been yelled at and they're late and Dad has to take her, fold their arms, and you're not having a whole lot of communication between home and school at that point in time. But now Dad walks into the office, and you decide to ask Dad a question. "Can you help me with this project?" "Wait a minute. I'll do it in a few minutes. It's been a long, bad morning." Right? Any of you ever had those experiences? Either at home or somebody been yelled at first thing in the morning? The event we have plus our response creates the outcome. So we can have a bad day. We've got ungratefulness. Was he ungrateful? Hey, his wife made breakfast. Many of us would be happy if somebody made us breakfast in the morning, right? Outcome, pretty bad. Now, great stuff happens. There's fear. There's a lot of times great things happen, and those great things that happen create more fear. You get the big new customer, and it's like, shoot, now what do I do? How am I going to get this delivered? I've got this new project. I don't have time to get this stuff done. So the fear goes and creates negative outcome. The economy's bad. We have doubt. We lose a client. We've got some pessimism, Oh, I lost that client. What am I going to do now? How am I going to pay? What's the next step going to be? Serious illness. I've got a client that I felt bad for them this particular week. They had one of their primary office people. She ended up getting very sick. Another person, her husband was in the military, he got called away and she had to leave literally within 24 hours. And her office manager's husband died, all within the space of about 3 days. I'd call it a bad day. She gave me a call and sort of said, can you help me on this? And we walked through it. But she could have very easily said, hey, I'm just out of here. This is just too much. But we can then choose to have a response. So let me tell you the story. Excuse me, my clicker thing is actually in the back there, and sometimes it's not connecting with me. But let's do the orange juice story again. Dad and daughter come downstairs. Orange juice is there. Orange juice still gets spilled, so the event is still the same. Now, however, Dad says, well, guess we've had our first orange juice spill of the day. Yay! Let's go see who can get change faster. They both run upstairs. They both have a race. They both come downstairs in time for the bus to pull up front. And girl gets on the bus. Dad gets to work. You ask him, gee, can I have some help on this project? And he says, sure. Give me a couple minutes to set things down. Same exact event, very different response, very different outcome. So this becomes the part of the mirror aspect of us looking at how are we responding to things, because so often we want to go fire somebody because they yelled at us this morning, or they're not doing the things we want, or they're not up to the expectations we have. But how are we communicating with them? What are we communicating either in the verbal or the nonverbal cues that is having an impact as to how they look at things? So are you having fun yet? Because this is the mirror part. This is the part that you can have control over. You thought you were going to come and figure out how to have impact to get rid of all these people that don't do anything right for you, right? We're looking at things in a different way. So the same thing goes. Great stuff happens. You're still not sure how you're going to deliver that new project that you just got, but guess what? Have faith that you're going to have the ability. You can ask for the help. You can get the things done, and you can move on. You can lose a client. Guess what? I needed a client when I got them. I've got them at the time. Now I need to go do something to get another client. So what am I going to do about it? Because a half-hour, 5-day pity party is not going to improve anything, is it? The same thing goes with serious illness. We've had a number of catastrophes here. Because I'm from Boston, I followed the Boston Massacre, and it's been fascinating to just look at the same event and how many of those people that now no longer have arms and legs walked, ran the marathon, at least part of it. So it goes to our responsiveness and how we look at things and how we want to move forward from there. So now we have rules of the game. This is also goes to that communication aspect of how do you want people to show up? How do you want people when to show up? Do they know what they need to look like? You may say, what do you mean what they need to look like, okay? Are they allowed to, wear jeans? Are they allowed to wear t-shirts? Are they allowed to, what are the rules that you need to have? And are you being clear and explicit about what needs to happen? Most of the clients that I work with, when they have subcontractors, and this applies in many cases to subcontractors, but even to customers, but most of them that work with subcontractors, they have a written rules of the game as to here's what we expect when you are on our customer site and when you're dealing with us. And they sign it. And it gets reviewed with them on an annual basis. Now, do they still have problems? Hey, we're human. We're all human. But it eliminates, and it goes back to, this is how we expect you to operate when we're going to be working together with you. And what it does is it gives everybody a common ground as to what's the foundation that we're going to work on, and how are we going to build it from there. Because if you don't have those rules of the game, I am, the Vulcan mind meld, for those of you who are Star Trek fans, has not yet been perfected. And actually, I figured that it'd probably be pretty sad if you did one, because you really don't want to know what's in my mind. I barely want to know what's in my mind. So it's really just going and understanding how that all fits together. Now, boundaries. One of my clients has a partner that's up in the Washington, D.C. area. And This partner kept calling him at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And the first time was because there was something urgent with a client. The second time he said, gee, this is an everyday routine. The third time it's sort of like, okay, we need to set some boundaries here. If you've got an issue at night and it's about a client, feel free to give me a call. I reserve the right not to answer your phone call, but feel free to give me a call. But if you've got things that are not critical that can be answered during the day, I have things I'm doing at night. So you've got to create boundaries, and this becomes absolutely critical in family businesses. But it also becomes critical in understanding how you're going to work with your employees as well. I've got one of my clients that says you cannot use cell phones, personal cell phones for personal business during the day. So I don't care what the boundaries are, I don't care what the rules are, but if you are not communicating to them, what happens is all of a sudden somebody's on the phone and you're going, what are they doing? Are they doing personal work? Or are they doing business work? And the first time it's okay, and then it's the second time, and then it's the third time, and then all of a sudden you're going, they're not performing the way we thought they should. They're not doing the things we want them to. And those seeds get planted, and as a result, you now have a different perspective that you haven't necessarily cleared up with them. We're going to see how I do this one. I normally have a wireless mic, and I have 2 balls, and I will probably drop one of these in the process as I do this story. But there's 5 aspects to our life. See, I have a hard time. 5 aspects to our life. One of them is work. One of them is our health. One of them is our spiritual life. One of them is our friends, and one of them is our family. The reality is, work is like this bouncing ball. You can bounce it, and it will always be there. Thank you very much. I have choice. I can put the microphone down, or I can go from there. Work, no matter how you bounce it, it always comes back. Anybody want to argue with that there's never enough work to do? There's always enough work to do. It's always there. But the reality is, if we stop spending time with our friends, we stop working out, we start doing the other things that we need to, it's a lot more like the glass ball that doesn't really bounce. It might bounce a little bit, but as we understand boundaries, we need to have the boundaries that play into the mirror that we have. Are we expecting employees to work and do things that we wouldn't want to do themselves, and or have we communicated with them? And here's the piece that plays into it. What did we communicate? And this will go really especially to employees and subcontractors. What did we communicate to them before we hired them? Did they really know? Were we really clear as to what the expectations were? Or did we really not want them to know what we're really going to expect them to do, and as a result we really figured they'll just find it out and they'll go with the flow, and then we wonder why things aren't working well, and man, we sure don't know how to hire very well, do we? And so it plays into that. And so that's why boundaries become important on all aspects. So now we go to roles and responsibilities. Anybody in here procrastinate? Any of you in here lie? No, I'm joking. Those who didn't raise your hand for the procrastination. I find in a lot of situations, lack of roles and responsibilities becomes the #1 reason to procrastinate, because I was waiting for her to do it because I thought she needed to do it, or it was really his responsibility, or I didn't know that was my job, or the customer's going, what do you mean that I'm supposed to take care of that? I didn't think that I had to install it. I thought you said you were going to install it. So roles and responsibility is being crystal clear and very intentional about what everybody needs to do. Notice again, I'm focusing on all of you before I've ever focused on, some of you came in and going, I want the 3 quick steps on how to fire people. And when I'm done with that, I can just leave. And I'm starting with the first 25 steps on what you need to look at, how you're looking at yourself and running your own business before you can ever look at beginning to fire somebody. Roles and responsibilities, especially with the family business, so often what I see is people doing the things that they don't like doing because they feel they have to do it. You need to run the family business in the same way you run the regular business, and that's having an org chart and figuring out who's responsible for doing what, because otherwise you will get cleaning of fingers. You get it in the big corporate environment. I got a number of my clients that the lack of empowerment, because they don't know they're supposed to do it. And as a result, because they don't know they're supposed to do it, they don't do it until they get in trouble, or they're absolutely afraid of doing something because they might get blamed or they might get in trouble for it. So the roles and responsibilities and clarity eliminates a lot of that confusion and allows everybody to move forward and do the things that they need to. This is just a partial list of things that might be non-negotiable. So let's just go with the whole concept of truth. One of my clients asked a receptionist and said, I need some salt, because they needed salt packets. The salt was a way for them to determine whether one of their pieces of equipment was working. So the receptionist said, no problem. Next time I go to McDonald's, I'll pick up a couple packets of salt. At which time my client said, no, that's not how you do it. And as far as I'm concerned, that's stealing, and she basically let her go. Now, she happened to have been through an agency so she could do it, but the real reason she let her go is if you're going to steal from McDonald's for salt, what are you going to steal from me? So I gave that same story, and I gave it to another one of my clients and was having a discussion with them. And they looked at me and said, well, I'd never let her go for that. We've had people that have gone on trips, put in for hotels, and not stayed there, and we've known that. And we've kept them because they're good revenue producers. Both of these clients would say integrity and truth are critical. You've got two somewhat to very different perspectives there. But so often what we do is we say non-negotiable is truth. We'll have you define truth or integrity. And there's an aspect that they're this far apart in those two examples, but both of them, when I talk to them, say integrity and truth are absolutely critical. So how are you defining it as you go and talk to your vendors, your customers, and you live it in what you're doing? We can take that with trust, quality. Profit's always a fun one. I was just in New Hampshire. Actually, we were in New Hampshire and went and spent a couple days with Vermont, and I joked that we ate our way through Vermont. Started at Ben & Jerry's, ice cream factory. For those of you who do not know Ben & Jerry's ice cream, it was very, very good. And then I actually went with them. I don't drink coffee, but my husband and son went to Green Mountain Coffee, was one of the last places we stopped, and had some coffee. But both of them have a priority of spending between 7 and 8 days per employee, 100% paid, working in the community environment, okay? It's actually a requirement. So if you look at all of their employees and the number of people and the lack of, quote, revenue and productivity that it plays into there, that affects their bottom line. I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. I like it. I like that they're willing to do it from there. But where does profit fit into your realm of importance within the business, and are you communicating that to your vendors, to your customers, to the people that you're working with? Do they understand? Ethics is another one. Payment is another one. I can give stories on each one of those, but these are just examples of what are your non-negotiables. And do you communicate? And do you live what those are? And do you communicate what they mean? Because those are the pieces that play together and make the difference as to whether you're going to need to fire someone or keep them. Because if they don't know and understand where you're coming from, how can they deliver from there? Measurement. So we've gone and we've determined we're always above the line. We've done everything that we need to from our mirror perspective, but we've got some customers that we're just not too sure. Are they really financially profitable? How many of you actually right now that have business owners or work in a business analyze profitability by customer? Awesome. Because that's what you need to be doing, is understanding there are customers that are an absolute pain to work with, but they're incredibly profitable. There are also customers that are absolutely paying to work with and that are not so profitable. And you can't make a decision as to whether to fire a customer if you don't know what you're making off of them. And you have to have that straight view of the math aspect of it. To me, business is 99.9% math. Even employee relations can be done because you can measure it down to KPIs, key performance indicators, as to whether they're doing what they should be doing or not. So you've got to have the math behind this to understand what's the impact. Because there's the financials, but there's also the emotional aspect and the distraction from there. I had a client many years ago that actually was very, very profitable, but the emotional impact, anytime the phone rang and it was that customer, it was sort of like the entire business sort of went, shoot, what does he want this time? So we fired him. Morale went up, profitability went up, satisfaction with the job went up. So you've got to play all the factors together and play it into it. The other is the opportunity. I actually have a client now who had 2 businesses. He now has 1 business because he was profitable in the second business, but it was a time emotional drain on everything else that they did. So they closed down the other business. They feel 100 pounds lighter, free, excited, and ready to go because they now get to focus on the business where their passion is. And people around them go, but that business is profitable. Why would you shut it down? Because everything else that was draining from us was so important, was so critical that we just had to be able to step back from it. And then it goes to the distraction as well. What are you having to do? Now, as you measure this, have you gone and looked and said, I've communicated well with these customers. I've done everything. I've got systems in place. I've gone and done everything I possibly can. And it's still not worth it. Or you understand the cost. Then you can go and go to the final M of my 4 M's, and that's movement. Now you've done everything else, you've looked at it. Now, I don't want any one of you, so pay attention, and those in the back row that are sleeping now, because I haven't picked on you enough at this point. I don't want anybody to go and say, oh, this is going to take a whole lot of time. I got to first figure out if my mindset is good, then I got to reflect on myself, then I got to measure. It's going to take me 12 and a half years to figure out if I can fire this customer or this employee or this vendor. Not. A lot of this can be some honest introspection with some employees, somebody you work with, yourself, but just go through the process. It can take all of 15 minutes. Or it can take 15, well, maybe not 15 years, but it can take some time, because if you really want to make the changes and to determine that maybe some of the problems goes with you. I have seen some of the worst customers that have caused more problems turned into raving fans just by the attitude, the perspective of the owners, the employees, and everybody else changing. So as you look at that, when they're still too hard to deal with, you still go, man, getting up in the morning, if I didn't have to deal with him, life would be good. Guess what? Life's too short. Figure out a way to move them on. I often say send them to your competitors. If they're that big of a pain, it'll distract the competitor for a while, or guess what? The competitor might get along with them really well. So you've got 2 alternatives, but it's a win all the way along, no matter how it works. If you're not making enough money, and I use the Green Mountain example, it's not all about money, but if you're not making the money that you need to be making, you need to understand what those numbers are. And you need to understand what is your non-negotiable. It comes back to that. If conflicts are constant. I'm probably as direct of a person, and those of you who know me know that I'm fairly direct on things. I'm probably that way because I don't like to deal with conflict. I don't live in conflict, never have. And if I'm going to be in a situation where conflicts are constant, you're going to hear from me because we're going to get it addressed. But if that's not an environment that your employees want to work in, that you want to work in, that your customers want to deal with, so you have to, if the conflicts are constant, make a change, make it happen. If you're not getting paid, it doesn't make any sense to work for nothing. And you really have to understand Again, that goes to the non-negotiables. What do you have to do? Teams not being respected, I've tolerated that for about 30 seconds. And I've gotten on the phone in my past life when I was a general manager talking to clients or customers at the time and said, can I have your side of the story of what just went on? Because what I heard bothers me a little bit, but can I have your perspective? And when they start going off on me, we just have to have another discussion because this is not acceptable. If there's things we need to change and you want to vent for a minute, that's a different story. But I'm the one that you vent at. You don't vent at my team. I don't pay them enough for you to vent at that. No, I'm joking. Poor product. If you're not getting the product and technical support that you need from them, you need to make a change. Here's just some reasons, okay? You may need to come up with your own, but you need to have them. And the difference on this is being proactive, not reactive. Because if you get ticked and your emotions are there, and you're like the dad who's yelling at the daughter and the wife, you're reacting to things, that's not the time to make the change. You need to have figured out what those rules are long before that. Now you need to take some action. What are the core issues? Okay? A lot of times it goes back to basic communication. One of the workshops that I have fun doing is a communication adapting class. Because there's some of us who are a little high-charged, really only want summary information. We don't want a lot of whole detail. We want to have short conversations and go on to the next thing. And then there's others of you who really like a lot more detail. They like someone to slow down and explain things to them because they process things in a different way. And they sometimes, if somebody like me who wants to go with things and just keep moving, they get frustrated with it. So you've got to look at what the communication is, how you communicate, how they communicate, and determine that what are the core issues about how we're integrating and how we're working together. Stop giving people 10 chances. That may sound horrible. That may sound mean. But it's, here's the plan, here's what we're going to do, here, what don't you understand of this? Said a little bit nicer maybe. And here's the implications. If it's an employee, write it up. If it's a customer, here's what the story is. Let's figure out what we can do. But the 10 chances just take the emotion, the distraction, the financial impact of the business down for every single time you give them another chance. Because they also don't think that you mean it. It's a little bit like kids. If you give them 12 chances, what are they going to do? Take advantage of every 12 chances you get. Documentation, remember your core values, and communicate. They are not, your customers, your vendors, your employees are not mind readers. So you've got to go communicate with it from there. So the action you need to take in this movement is really lay out the rules of the game, determine up front how you're going to address things, make sure it's a win, lay out your strategy, and probably one of the most important things is to review that aspect on a minimum of an annual basis. So if you've got a large contract with a customer, you need to sit down with them. Don't make the assumption that it's still working the same way it is, because a lot of times that's where you lose the customer. With an employee, I believe that by the time there was a review, there should be no surprises. We would have all the way along always talked about everything. Now, you get to this point, and she's starting to give me the cue. I'm starting to get the cue that I got a few minutes late. The good news is I only have one slide left. As you look at this, the movement really actually is understanding what you're going to do and just making it happen. Because at the time that you have the discussion and say, it's not working for us, they should have no question. Whether this is a subcontractor or employee, and in that matter, even a customer. So the actual firing should be almost a non-event. Now, I'm not saying it won't be emotional, I won't say it won't be hard, but it still should be very much a non-event. My guess is none of you were expecting me to say that, because you were really looking for, this is what I need to do. But it's the first three parts of it that has to be tied together to create that. So, We've talked a lot about this, transitioning the family business, because it's such a critical piece of it. The one point on this slide before I do get pulled off is there can only be one boss. I don't care if you're a husband, wife working together in a business, there can still only be one boss in each part of it. And you got to figure out who's the boss at any point in time. Otherwise, you will create conflict in every other part of the business. So I'll leave it there. In summary, we have mindset. What do you need to change? Mirror. How do you need to look at things? What do you need to measure? And then what do you need to do to actually make it happen? So with that, my question is, what have you learned today? Do I have 2 minutes? I got 2 minutes for questions. What did you learn? Who is willing to share one thing that you learned that you're going to do different? Because what happens if you sat here for an hour, how long we've been here at this point in time, and you have nothing you're going to put in place? What have you done? Wasted time. And I don't believe in wasting time. So, but who owns? I own the communication of the material, but you own the listening and what you're going to put into place from here. So who wants to share something? Yeah. Mirror. Looking at yourself. Anybody else? Yeah. Changing your mindset. Good one. Excellent. Yeah.
Do something you fear.
Do something you fear.
Once every day.
Once every day. Absolutely. You go and it changes your view of things. Anybody else that's not afraid to go say something that I won't call on? Yeah, go for it.
I just like the way you reframe the word fear. Because there are some days you look at what you're doing, you're like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. Why am I doing this? But I like the way you said face everything and rise.
Right.
I tweeted that for you.
Oh, thank you. So for those of you who might not have been able to hear, it's the perspective of fear. It's to face everything and rise, because sometimes we become overwhelmed. And if we just stop and just face it and rise, it can make a big difference in how we look at it. And thank you for retweeting that. Somebody, I saw another hand. Yes.
I would think one thing that I took away as something I need to be reminded of, which is when to step back and table an action and sleep on it or wait until tomorrow, as opposed to that knee-jerk, oh, I gotta take care of this right now. So letting my emotions calm down and get out of the picture and be able to act responsibly and like a grown adult.
So she, after the summary, I'm going to say she's going to grow up. No, please don't grow up. Because I haven't, my motto in life is I won't grow up if growing up means it will be beneath my dignity to climb a tree. So if you remember Tinkerbell, but no, what she really said was the whole ability to sleep on it and not have that instant reaction. Anybody else? Yes?
The ERO.
ERO? The event plus response is outcome is absolutely critical, because you can change somebody's day in an instant by your response to things across the board. So if any of you would like a copy of the slides, just hand me a business card and I will email them to you in PDF in case you missed some things because we were going over too quickly. If you'd like a copy of the book, it's up front. And one of the things I love to do is speaking engagements. I have a lot of fun with them. And I think Crystal is ready for the microphone before she trips me.